Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the afternoon of our Tech and Innovation Summit. I had to leave you in the morning, but how's it going? Excellent. I love a bit of, that's the only audience participation you're going to have. So for all the Brits going, oh my God, I hate this, that's it. So I'm about to chair a fascinating panel on applied AI. How do we get next generation and innovative application of AI right for businesses and for people? But just to give you an idea of what's coming up, we've got the AI panel, as you can see, all raring to go. Then we're going to have a panel on navigating the UK's semiconductor future. I'm sure all these panels are going to collide and converge as well. And then we've got the final panel of the day of tackling the UK's productivity puzzle. Again, I think we might touch on that in this panel as well. And particularly about robotics and automation, and are they part of the solution? So lots of fascinating conversations to come up this afternoon, but we're going to kick off with our applied AI panel. So I don't need to tell you all that last year, 2023, we saw AI kind of, well, it's not really the big bang of AI because AI has been around for many, many years. But we really became front and center as a driving force of innovation, offering immense opportunities for improvement across our public sector, across our private sectors and beyond. And now as that conversation has, of course, continued into 2024. And I think where we kind of had a bit of the big bang, the epiphany of last year, I think this year we've really kind of focused down on what's the application, what's the deployment, what does the diffusion of AI mean, and where's the value, right? Where's the opportunity? But how do we get this right for not just for businesses, but for people and society? So how do we get this right from an ethical point of view? How do we get governance right of AI? But this panel, we really wanted to, I suppose, showcase what adoption means and the benefits of adoption of AI, and to talk about how it can, support everything we've been talking about already today: efficiency, decision making, etc. And then we also want to explore how responsible AI practices can help businesses and can help us get this right as well. So I've got a wonderful panel, and we're going to explore lots of different kind of key issues that come up in this conversation. And then we're going to have some time for questions as well. So before we get to all that, I'm just going to ask my wonderful panel just to introduce themselves. I'm going to go down the line. Just introduce yourself and I'm aging myself here, in the best 𝗏𝗏 black way, who you are and where you come from. Can I ask you to kick off?
Hi everyone, and thanks to techUK for having me here. I'm 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏. I'm the relatively newly elected Member of Parliament for the 𝗲𝗏 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗏 PPS of the Environment Department. I come from South Wales, but professionally from venture capital and M&A.
Oh, welcome. Great to have you here at techUK. Tori?
Hello, I'm Tori Frame, 𝗬𝗏𝗃. I had the pleasure of supporting Matt Clifford in creating his AI Opportunity Action Plan. I come from Northern Ireland.
Regional, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. And my background is commercial, 32 years of commercial experience and an AI PhD.
Wonderful. Andrew, you going to do the regional play as well?
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Straits. I'm Associate Director at the 𝗏𝗏 Lovelace Institutes. We're a nonprofit based here in London that studies the impacts of AI in data. My background is I used to work for 10 years in the tech industry at Google in deep mines. And as you can probably tell from my accents, very sleep deprived. I'm an American. Let's not talk about it. But it's great to be here with all of you today.
Well, as I said to everybody at the start of today, lots of coffee is available.
Yes, my name is 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗏. I'm an enterprise architect at Workday. So in case you haven't heard of Workday, Workday supplies cloud-based finance and HR solutions. It's a platform that embeds AI directly in the platform as well and making it available to customers. So one of my main roles is to help our customers understand the value of AI and the way that we deliver it and how it can make an impact on their business.
Delighted to be here. I'm Gareth Workman. I'm Chief AI Officer at 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏, also from Northern Ireland. Again, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏, what we're doing, and it'd be great to share later, is just kind of how is AI going to transform kind of the citizen experience, and actually what's the tangible benefits for people. So again, it'd be fabulous to talk about that.
Brilliant. And I feel I have to bring the Yorkshire contingent here, as I'm from Yorkshire. So there you go, Yorkshire's covered. But I hope you agree, a really brilliant panel to really explore this conversation about applied AI and how do we get the application of AI right for businesses and for people as well. So let's dive into the kind of adoption point before we touch on, we're going to talk about governance, we're going to talk about skills, we're going to talk about lots of different things, but let's talk about adoption first. And, where are you seeing AI being adopted? Where is it having business value right now? And Kshekinda, maybe I'll come to you because you were talking about that just in your opening in terms of helping businesses to see that value. So what are you seeing from your perspective? And I'll ask everybody, but maybe can you kick us off?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So as I've said, at Workday, we supply solutions to our customers. We've embedded AI directly into our platform. What that means is that we have a pipeline and a way of actually creating use cases for AI. And we involve our customers in the development of those AI use cases. That really means that we're trying to stress the value of those use cases when we deliver them. So one of the important things to measure is what is the return on investment that you get from an AI use case, and that's the kind of way that we do it. In terms of our platform, we have over 60 use cases presently in production. And in terms of usage, there's over 75 million inferences, AI inferences per day on the platform. So that's quite a heavy usage, as you can imagine, and that's only going to carry on growing. If I give you some examples of where we made a difference to businesses, a number of years ago, we introduced something called the Skills Cloud, which is a multi-dimensional skills graph. It sort of understands where skills sit in relation to each other, how they relate to industry and so forth. We've had a number of organizations use this technology to try to transform into skills-based organizations. Talent is a really important thing for organizations, trying to acquire it, trying to retain it. Being skills-based means they can focus on acquiring the right skills and retaining the talent they need. So as a stat, what we found is that by using skills, the attrition rate for top talent has decreased by 40%, so having a direct impact on their businesses. In the finance space, which we also play in, we've got something equivalent which we call Journal Insights, which is really understanding the financial transactions that are happening in an organization. How do you log them? How do you encode them and so forth? One of the big usages of time within a finance department is trying to close the books, trying to make sure everything's encoded properly. What we've done with our AI is to be able to surface anomalies in the way that things are coded. So you don't have to scroll through and go through thousands of transactions, they're highlighted to you. So what we've found in terms of the impact is that the reviewing stage has gone down from something like 30 days to about 30 minutes. So huge savings again to the business by use of AI. And it carries on, things like generative AI are having a big impact. We can now, for example, generate job descriptions within minutes, whereas before it might have taken you many hours to develop. We can compare contracts to policies that the organization wishes to implement. That again saves time and makes sure that things are conformant as well.
Great examples of AI in action, as we would call it. Tori, I might come to you next, because this is kind of at the heart of what you're doing in your role within 𝗣𝗬𝗃 right now, right? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that and maybe what you're seeing in terms of the opportunities of applied AI.
In fact, we met on a round table we did together with Matt. So we took a fact-based approach and we went and interviewed 65 business leaders, CXOs, so not data people, not policy people, but people who are actually making investments in AI every day. And we asked them what big AI use cases are they seeing at scale? And what are the barriers? And so focusing just on the use cases, I should say we're defining AI broadly. So it's not just generative. It's also, I can't believe I'm saying it, old-fashioned ML and rules-based AI. So for those safety critical systems people out there, you'll be glad to know we were thinking about that too. Now, what we found was that there are at least 22 use cases that are driving productivity and growth across the UK in at least a couple of companies. Now, we're working with ministers to figure out what we do to support that, but I thought you might want to know something a bit more specific. So in terms of general use cases that might be interesting for any of you in the audience today, just to pick out a couple. So for instance, structured documentation drafting is saving people, for instance, with big compliance requirements, 80% of human time, but obviously there's a human reviewing it. It's augmenting their production. Another example is, for instance, prioritization analytics, getting far, far better, higher quality recommendations. And things like creative content creation, where people in the pre-production and post-production industry in the UK for film and media are saving 30 to 40% of their film production costs. So extraordinary opportunity in adopting trustworthy AI.
𝗫𝗫𝗃, some wonderful examples there, and I wonder whether what's on your mind when you think about applied or the adoption of AI, and the sheer opportunity here is immense, right? If we can really grasp this.
Totally right. I guess a couple of questions that are very much on my mind at the moment. One, a lot of the political conversation, I think, on technology broadly and AI specifically has been about how you make the case for diffusion and adoption. A lot of the political conversation was focused on developing the frontier in a kind of responsible and safe way. To me, the interesting challenge is how you see them not as dichotomous, but together. Google was a very frontier company when thinking about PageRank at the time of its development. It's now one of the most diffused software applications. And so the question for me is, how do we drive diffusion across the economy, but also our society in a way that we build long-term political consensus behind it? The second aspect of it is how we are able to build the UK's very distinct position in AI adoption and AI development more broadly as well. And I think there's a whole conversation about where we stand on LLMs, but to me, this shape of the opportunity is in thinking about the diversity of model clusters, but also in terms of the things that can drive adoption, whether it's privacy enhancement and protection, whether it's thinking about explainability and audit and assurance, a series of subsectors where it feels like we can both drive adoption, but also remain at the frontier as a country.
Yeah, Andrew, I see you're nodding away. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I just wanted to, because there's a really good mix here, and Gareth, I know I wanted to ask you, in terms of what you're seeing in adoption from your point of view, what does it mean to be responsible when deploying AI, and how are you seeing organizations approach that? And then Andrew, I'll definitely come to you because I know this is definitely in your wheelhouse at Ada, but Gareth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like lots of people are saying, okay, I need to adopt AI responsibly, and often the question is, well, what does that even mean? It's what does that mean for me as a kind of a user? So one of the things that I would kind of always talk about is what's your North Star? What is it you're hoping to achieve with AI? What is the business outcome or the citizen impact? Almost set the technology to the side for the moment to go, actually, if we were to harness this, here's the greater purpose. And alongside that, kind of, even for your people, to encourage them in the organization, what are your hard do's and don'ts? What are the things you say, happy for you to do this, but this is an ethical barrier, something we wouldn't push past. I think it's getting things into sort of plain English that's easily understandable, because with AI, there's lots of lexicon, there's lots of things that you're saying is good old-fashioned ML. There's still lots of mileage in machine learning.
Huge.
But it is that piece of, there's so much noise out there, so I think it's absolute clarity. And the other bit is, in terms of being responsible, is bring it to life through worked examples, but don't try and do something that's going to take you 3, 4, 6 months. What can you do in 1 or 2 weeks that actually goes, take an idea, so that conversation through the concept in maybe 5 days, understand what are the steps you need to do, and go, actually, what are the potential pitfalls? What's the potential harms to an individual, a citizen? Is this going to, unfairly assess someone or create kind of bias? So it is that piece of working through real things. And it's kind of, before kind of closing up, it is, once you've figured out your path for your organization, it will be different for each, then you can start to look at that at a more wholesale and scale it out, rather than trying to do too much. And I think Laura Valance said earlier, the risk of boiling the ocean. So actually it's that piece of, where can you show true return on investment? And that's what everyone's looking for. And then use that as your basis to scale out and look at the things you need to be around being responsible, ethical, and safe.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts of this conversation, right, Andrew? There's the, how do we show value, and how do we really get people excited about the opportunities of AI and what it can really mean, and Tori and other examples have really brought that to life. But then as Kanishka said, how do we make sure that we do it ethically and responsibly, and we don't look at these as one or t'other, see, bringing my Yorkshire out, but how do the two fit together? And that's really what we've got to get right, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's interesting. So many of the examples we're talking about here are not the kind of sort of fancy, crazy, we're going to automate doctors, we're going to replace radiologists, we're going to all have an AI teacher examples. They're actually quite straightforward, not very sexy back office examples, but ones that are perfectly suited for an AI solution.
Ones with big impact, right?
Huge impact. And I really think that's important that we focus on that. Where is the impact? The three things I just want to add in. One, I think, is the conversation around AI is often focused on this question of capabilities. Can I get an AI system to do something in the absolute sense, even if it's only 1 of 1,000 times? That's useless for businesses. You don't care about absolute capabilities, you care about reliability. How often is it doing the thing that I need it to do on a recurring basis with low error rates? The second thing is this question of our error tolerance. What kinds of use cases are we comfortable with having some degree of error? It's one thing, to give a real life example, if a local authority is using a tool to make predictions about whether someone is at risk of slipping into homelessness. The intervention there is a call from a social worker. It's very low stakes. If they get it wrong, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a call that the other person can say, I don't need any help. It's very different when we talk about using that same tool to make interventions or to assess the risk of a child in that home being at risk of child abuse, where the intervention actually is much more severe. We have to get those examples right. And that means that it kind of brings us to the third thing. What type of AI system is most suited for the kinds of tasks? And crucially, it might not even be AI. It might be a completely untechnological solution that we need to factor in. I think there's a tendency right now to look at generative AI as this panacea, this kind of general purpose framing of these tools. And what we're learning as businesses, and we hear this a lot in our roundtable discussions with startups and medium-sized businesses, is actually it's not really general purpose. It's sort of, in many ways, that's kind of creating an unrealistic expectation for businesses that this, well, sorry, I shouldn't use specific examples, but one certain type of AI assistant that many of us might find in our internal organizational communication system is a smart intern capable of doing anything. When in reality, it's good for a couple types of things where truth doesn't matter or accuracy doesn't matter, things where you can easily fact check the accuracy, or things where the stakes are such that it's fine if it gets it wrong 20% of the time. So I think that's the kind of three challenges as I see it when we talk about barriers to adoption. And part of the challenge here is trying to, as you are wonderfully doing, I think, in the opportunities work, trying to figure out what those use cases are that will have high impact, are fit for purpose, and we can trust are reliable.
And if I may add to that, we very much found that in our interviews, and to actually bridge this conversation around performance and safety, explainability, etc. We found that the same businesses, to one business, they would have exactly the same technology in different use cases, and they would trust it in some circumstances, and they wouldn't in others. And it was because, one, it didn't do the job, the performance, and two, the risk. So people who found themselves able to really drive these things are very clear about those and pilot across the organization. But then at the same time, this safety and ethical thing is about the process, like how, a lot of the time, the way it's positioned is, how does the algorithm come up with the solution? And actually, what I heard business leaders say was, I want people to tell me that. I am not the expert. And that's why we're doing as much as we are to create the assurance industry in the UK. And we hope that it will become a world leader, and it will provide businesses with the assurance that the product is safe and it performs.
Yeah, I mean, the UK we're a great supporter of AI assurance and the AI assurance market, and how do we grow them? It seems to be key. Just going back to Andrew, so are you thinking then that we don't, and based on what Tori was just saying, that we're not getting the safety, transparency conversation right, and we need to be broadening it out?
Yeah, I think the AI safety conversation at the very start was focused on this concept of evaluations of a model. So it's a large language model. And model level evaluations can tell us something. They can tell you if something has a propensity to give harmful instructions, or if it has the capability in the absolute sense of doing something that's quite risky. That's useful for some kinds of risks. If your concerns are around biosafety, you do want to test the capabilities of a model before it's more widely distributed in society. But safety is not a model property. That's not sort of the only way that we talk about safety. To really understand if something is safe, You have to understand how that system is impacting humans who are using it, how it's changing their environment. And that requires a whole other set of considerations and types of evaluations of safety that go downstream into applications. Now, the UK AI Safety Institute has a wonderful sort of push now undergoing around systemic safety. The SAC has just announced a sociotechnical safety program that's trying to do more of this evaluation testing, more of this methods building for how assurance providers or companies themselves can do those kinds of reliability tests, those tests of performance for their particular use case, and crucially those assessments of the kinds of risks that are the hardest ones to spot. What is the impact of this on humans? I'll give a great example. One of the challenging questions is this question of de-skilling. If you, there's some research about radiographers and sort of AI-assisted machine learning that shows that over time, experienced radiographers actually start to de-skill. They put too much faith in the system, and when presented with obvious images that have errors, they start to miss them. And that's a really hard thing to measure and monitor over time, but if we can start to find ways to design around that, for example, to build in features that kind of constantly test and challenge a user so they're not overly relying on it, kind of encouraging them to treat it as an actual co-pilot or complementary tool, you can probably get around some of those problems. But right now we just don't test for that. We don't have the evaluation mechanisms for testing for that. And that's, I think, the massive gap around safety and reliability that we have to go to next.
Yeah, it's a really important conversation and we've always been thinking about saying that of where do the, can't speak today, where do the gaps exist, right? What are we already doing? What are organizations already doing? But where are the gaps and how do we need to fill those gaps? Sukhvinder, I'd love to come to you in terms of, and actually to all the panelists that haven't spoken on this topic, but focusing on how do we have that conversation though, or how do you have that conversation with organizations around, or the conversation around safety and transparency and assurance so that we can build that trust and confidence, which is so key for the application of AI, right? It's vital.
Absolutely, and it's probably the most common conversation I have with my customers. So the Workday's approach really has been to be very open and transparent about what it's doing, how it's doing it. Responsible AI really starts off at the top of the organization. It can't be somewhere in middle management or something like that. It's got to start up and be driven from the top. And you have to have responsibility and accountability at that level as well. So we have an advisory council that is staffed by C-level people. They hold that accountability and responsibility for making sure that we have principles, and we have 4 principles, by the way, that embody what we mean by responsible AI. And sort of the way that we're going to move forward and develop our capabilities. But it doesn't stop there, right? You need to make sure that the rest of the organization is following those rules. So you have to have process, you have to have structure, you have to have controls and governance and measures, all those kind of things to make sure it's being enforced. And it's not just product development that are involved in this, it's multiple parts of the organization that need to be involved. So we've got product development, obviously, but we've also got legal, we've got our privacy, our compliance group. So all of those have a stake in making sure that we're delivering AI in a responsible way. When it comes to the conversation with our customers, it's very much about explaining what we're doing, but also about being open and sharing with them. So for each of the use cases that we have, we publish to our customer base what we're actually doing. So what data is it using? What models and how are we training it? Is this particular use case prone to a fairness issue, for example? If it is, then what are we doing about it? So we've taken this approach that you have to be it's a collaboration. We're involving customers right at the start, as I mentioned earlier, to try to help us develop use cases that are of value. But right at the end, we want to make sure when we deliver something, they understand what they're getting. The other part of the conversation around responsibility is, what are you doing with my data? Right, and that's probably the number one conversation I have with them. So we talk them through that, and this declaration of what our AI is doing includes very clear definition of what data is being used, and we give them control. It's no point just telling them what it is. They need control over whether they want to subscribe to it or not. Right? So our customers have the ability to decide whether they want to share that data, whether they want to subscribe in that service. So it's not a you've got to take it irrespective. It's a business decision from their perspective as to what AI is appropriate for their organisation. So we give them that control as well. So it's all about transparency, sharing control, and making sure that the communication is clear in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, so Gareth, I wonder what your view on this in terms of how you build or how you have that conversation with organisations. And it's got to be a conversation around how organisations adopting AI can get the governance side of this right as well, right? So it's getting them excited about the technology, but then getting them, whether it's building their internal capability and their capacity or understanding what governance means for them.
Yep.
This must be a conversation that you have a lot as well.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things you should have up front. Like we've built things over time. When you retrospectively fit security on towards the end, you end up with a suboptimal, compromised solution. So from an AI governance perspective, but equally, the advice that I always give is do not treat it as an isolated, separate governance process. You're going to process for data, for security. AI is interwoven with those two things. So actually creating something outside of it is not the right answer because you end up with different forums and whatnot. So I think that bit is use what you've got. And the other piece then is really around the education aspect. You can have all the policy and governance and everything you might want, and you might have the comfort of having process. However, if people don't understand how to follow, so I think that's the bit is, it's the repeated conversation with people. Encourage people to bring to your organization how they see AI either could be used or is already being used. But you touched on it earlier, and so November 2022, AI became democratized. Yeah. Everyone can access it, whether it's a credit card away or otherwise. So the likelihood is someone somewhere in your organization is using AI, and they may not be building with it, but they are certainly using it. So it's that piece of make it as easy as possible for governance to be an approachable thing, and it doesn't end up with we've all been there, the them and us. It's, I want to do something, but governance is in my way. How do you create that kind of collaborative ecosystem whereby actually it's encouraged to bring your AI ideas forward and then bring it through the process?
Yeah, I'm now wondering how many people in the audience are sitting there going back to their organisations tomorrow and going, are we using AI? That kind of how many emails will be fired off, but really, really good point. So I wanted to move on to government's role in supporting and encouraging adoption of AI. 𝗫𝗓𝗃, I can't really have this conversation without perhaps talking about the industrial strategy. And Lord Valence was here earlier and talking about the industrial strategy as a key tool for looking at technology and innovation. How do you envision AI will be included in the industrial strategy, or how could it affect the industrial strategy affect the UK's AI strategy and vice versa? Do you see them interwoven? They've got to be, really, haven't they?
Well, I think very broadly speaking, digital technologies are part of the sectoral approach that we're taking in the industrial strategy. Let me say kind of a very macro thing, which is the genesis of the industrial strategy is the recognition that over an extended period of time, the primary crisis in this country, which is a crisis of productivity and growth, has come about in part due to a crisis in investment. The reason this is really critical in this room in particular is because if you look at private capex in this country post-GFC, that has the biggest decline as a relative share of any other type of private capital investment. And so being able to get the right investment, private investment in particular, but public and private investment in technology and in AI in particular, is a really, really critical input. And so when the industrial strategy conversation is happening, the exam question we're trying to answer is we want to get to a level of growth in a context of productivity, which is radically different. I think investment is the way to get there. And then what can we do across government in our industrial strategy to be able to bring that about? So the focus that we have elsewhere as well in the fundamental inputs of utilities, energy, land, water, talent, capital, that is the kind of horizontal set of things that you have to try and bring about. And I'm really glad that AI, through the work that Tori and Matt are doing, and more broadly, digital technology is front and center in that. I guess let me put one kind of more provocative claim out here, which is when I think about our private investment in AI in this country, there are two things that come to my mind. One, it feels to me, having spent some time in the city over the last decade, that the calculations of rate of return on initial investment in ICT generally, but AI particularly, feels very different here than it does, say, in the United States. And so to your question of how do you drive adoption in the industrial strategy question, one way I think I'd feel we've defined success is if CIOs, CROs, and indeed CEOs make that slight leap of faith that is required to justify investments where your initial NPV might not be as clear cut. And I think the corollary of that is if you're a company selling into British companies, what I've heard consistently as an investor, and now just actually this morning I was with an AI startup as well, the selling experience still feels very, very different here through the willingness of the buyers that we have in a number of enterprise contexts. And I think that is partly a function of effectively management density. Do we have enough people who've been through the experience of creating really fast growing firms in this country, or who have made a slight bet personally and at a corporate level in growth rather than retention? And it's not a surprise that in Britain, I think the average age of our top 10 listed companies is 133. In the United States, it's 39. No one in this room has seen a company go from 0 to top 10. In the UK and the United States, they've seen it again and again and again, 8 times out of the top 10. So that is a broader point I'm making, but I think the success metric as I have it in my mind on industrial strategy as it relates to AI is how can we radically move the needle for private investment in AI specifically. I think we have a good approach across the different inputs, but the metric of success for me is do British firms in their adoption and the experience of selling into them feel radically different by the end of our tenure.
So thank you so much. And Tori, just because this obviously, again, interlinks into the work that you're leading. And I'm just curious on kind of your view on what has just been said, but also how do we then, if it's encouraging companies to invest more, it's making those decisions, it's perhaps being braver than they are right now. And to Gareth's point, is it about AI education? We talk a lot about AI literacy, and I'm sure that's key as well. Then how do we help companies, how do we help organizations to do this, to invest, to be brave, to adopt and to deploy and to use ethically and responsibly, of course, but how do we get business leaders to do it? Sorry, that's a really simplistic question, but...
Well, so where I'll start is the problem definition. So the barriers that we found are basically threefold, the really big barriers. So we looked at it in terms of a funnel, in the sense that as a business, it's almost ridiculous to have a 5 or a 10-year AI strategy because, think back to 2022. We had no idea what will be happening now. So the best thing you can do is have a vision for your business in the age of AI. Spot some high-impact use cases, find some credible solutions, pilot them. If they work, make a go, no-go decision and scale them up. That's what people who are doing it well are doing. And I am most impressed by businesses who are not AI native or tech native, but are actually good old-fashioned businesses that have really taken this on. And that's what they're doing. The first time they did it, it was a leap of faith. But then as they develop the muscle, they get really good at this. Now, the barriers, as I was saying, were threefold. So first of all, leaders are finding it really difficult to imagine their business in the age of AI. And their C-suites aren't helping them very much either. What they need is some real translational capability, that ability to translate from the business use case, the thing that they're trying to do, to how AI might help them. So that's issue number one, and we're thinking about a bunch of different ways to deal with that and working with ministers on the answer. The next one I found was utterly fascinating, which is we found a plethora of piloting as we interviewed people. So everyone's at it. And the sad thing is they do it and they don't go any further a lot of the time. And there's a whole lot of reasons around it, but they don't structure the pilots right. They don't measure them in a way that if they pass those metrics, they would scale up. And so we're very excited by opportunities to help businesses understand how to pilot well and also how to measure performance well. And then the third area that we found people falling out, oh, by the way, sorry, data. Obviously data. Real-time data was a real issue. Some people could download it for the pilot and then they couldn't scale up. The third area, though, was around the area where we talked about earlier, which is awareness of the type of impact use cases and products can have. So there was another plethora. It was a plethora of products this time. Everyone, are they a bunch of charlatans? Do they really do what it says on the tin? So addressing those 3 barriers we think would really make a difference. And we're figuring out, and you'll hear more when the Opportunity Action Plan is published, about how.
And Andrew, that brings us back to role of AI assurance, role of privacy enhancing technologies, the role of helping, how do we help organizations have, I know I keep coming back to it, but that confidence, that assurance that they can move forward, they can take it from a pilot internally to externally, because no one wants to get this wrong, right? And we've been talking about this for years of how do we help organizations to get this right?
Yeah, everything you're saying completely tracks with our experience of talking with public sector institutions and private sector organizations that are feeling very stuck. And I think as much as we want productivity to be an objective with use of AI, we also need to couple that with quality and reliability, because you might have short-term productivity gains, but you might be gaining a long-term quality of service problem that will sink your business. I'll give a great example of this right now with one product we're looking at. It's actually, in my opinion, this is a brilliant product, and the team building is incredible, but they're running into this fundamental challenge. It's a product that does 3 things. It records conversations between social workers and members of the public who they're working with. It transcribes it using OpenAI's Whisper. It then summarizes it into a set of notes and gives some recommended next steps. And that would save 3 days of almost every social worker's time. It's a huge productivity improvement. Now the problem is, OpenAI's Whisper is notorious for hallucinating. It will sort of add in additional content and additional bits. And these are documents that are legal documents. They will decide things like which children will be taken out of a home or what follow-on action will take place. And so you have this sort of tension between the need to save productivity for social workers and the risk that you are creating a sort of quality of service issue that in the long run can really destroy the public's trust and faith in their local authorities and their social workers and lead to real-world harm. So how do you get past that? That's where assurance can step in. If you could have some assurance of what kind of tech in this product would help improve and find a happy balance between the productivity savings and the quality of service, if you can have some clarity about what design choices you could put in place to ensure that someone's checking the transcript every so often, or kind of sort of using it in the way that we want them to use it, where it's sort of critically assessing what they're seeing, not just taking it for granted, that's the way to kind of find those solutions. It gets you to that right balance of quality of service and productivity. But the challenge is we don't really have those methods for doing it. There's sort of, as you say, a lot of piloting, but no clarity of what piloting should look like, what success looks like, how to assess this. Some of this are a very common challenge that every organization is facing. Some of these are very bespoke. So the more we can crack into those problems, I think that's how we move forward.
Yeah, and I think we have to recognize that there's some great work happening, but we're still in the foothills, right? We're still at the beginning of this. It's not that, oh, this hasn't been done. Why hasn't this been done? The technology is evolving still. We're still learning. We're still applying it. We're still figuring this out as well. But there are some solutions. There are solutions coming through from the industry to help address these issues. And I think AI assurance and the AI assurance tools and technologies that go and check out the RTA. I've got some great case studies which we worked on of how AI assurance can help now, right? Can help address some of those issues. And then back to your point, Andrew, about as this technology evolves and as its use evolves, if gaps arise, how do we fill those gaps and how do we do that together? But Kanisha, back to your point of it's getting that balance, and Andrew used the word before I did, balance. It's getting the conversation right as well, right? We need to have the conversation about how do we fill those gaps, or what's missing, what we need to build that assurance. But that we don't miss or we don't lose the opportunities as well, because the application of AI has so much potential. So it's getting that conversation right, getting the narrative right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I'm sure there are win-win situations where through assurance and being able to plan the governance at the outset, you're able to get both the productivity impact and mitigate the downside risk that Andrew's highlighted. But I can't stress enough, to me it feels like if you look at it at a system level in this country, I think the primary crisis remains the fact that in aggregate, we have a productivity crisis undermining any faith in the social care system, for example, that you're talking about, Andrew. And to me, that is the kind of burning sense of urgency that I'd have in thinking about this. And the narrative is really important on this, because I think it's my main observation on the narrative is that we sometimes use the downside case to stop the upside opportunity, rather than to build them together. And culturally, if there's one thing that I'm passionate about in our politics, is to build a case for the upside alongside mitigating the downside, rather than to position them as in fundamental tension.
Yeah. So I've got one more question that I'm going to ask the panel, but then I'm going to come to the audience. If you have any questions, so get thinking, and then we'll come to you. But we can't have this conversation about how do we get application of AI right without talking about the very important topic of future of work and the workforce. And 𝗨𝗲𝗀, maybe I can come to you about, how the adoption of AI and how it's augmenting the human experience of work. Obviously, you guys are front and center of this, you see this. And how is the adoption of AI affecting or changing the future of work? Where are we now and where do you think we're going? Because this goes to the point, Andrew was talking about skills, Gareth was talking, we've all mentioned kind of how do we give people what they need? And I suppose a question I'd love to bring to the other panelists as well, after you've provided your thoughts, is the impact on the skills that the UK needs. And are we walking into a giant skills gap, or what do we need to fill that? So where are we now, perhaps? And then the other panelists, I'd love to any thoughts on what the skills gap we actually think we have is.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI is obviously going to have a very transformative effect across industry. So it's a generally applicable technology. It's not restrictive to one sector, so it's going to apply everywhere. We've seen other sort of technological revolutions happen before. Right, this is going to be bigger, right, have more impact. And in those revolutions, what we've seen is the job markets have changed. Right, the skills that you need in order to progress in those new job markets are different from what they were before. And we're going to see similar things happening here. There's been lots of studies, so there's lots of organizations have done studies as to what the future looks like. We've done studies as well. We've done it in collaboration. You've got the World Economic Forum, the OECD, doing all these kind of studies that show where things are going to move. But if we sort of focus in on what it means to organizations, people, in terms of how a job's going to change and what does that mean? Yeah. So with any job, it's a set of skills that you bring to that job in order to do it in a productive and effective way. As AI comes in, that set of skills will change over time. So the issue really becomes, how do we keep our people skilled up so that they can react to those changes? And this falls into the lap of many parts of society, right? So as well as government supporting it, educational institutions supporting it, professional institutions supporting it, you've also got businesses needing to support and invest in their people as well, right? So how do they track what skills need to be done? And this, the skills profile will change. So the first thing is to really understand where your organisation is going, what skills do you actually think you need in the future, and then how do you either acquire that talent, but acquiring talent can be quite expensive and challenging. So how do you develop that talent within your own people? So we will be finding, I think, the organisations through support from other institutions will invest in people and keep them moving forward and make sure they have the right kind of skills. And individuals will be empowered as well. So individuals will be in charge of their careers much more than we see today. So they will decide what kind of skills they want to develop, what they think gives them the best job opportunity. So as they develop those people that are able to change and get these new skills will find the greatest opportunities in the future. It doesn't stop there though, right? So the nature of the job market changes as well. So AI may take some jobs away, but if you read some of the studies, there was a great study that was published by Dell that said 85% of the jobs in 2030 don't exist at the moment. Yeah. So there'll be a whole new set of jobs that will become available. And we've seen that in previous technological revolutions where new jobs have been created based on the needs of that new technology. And this is where skills will drive us to meet that new job market in the future.
Yeah, and Gareth, that's where that education and literacy has got to come in as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to go slightly off tangent, but
go for it.
There's a piece where we've kind of focused on the skills to build these AI platforms, but actually AI is going to touch absolutely every one of us. Here, we're going to use it. We're not going to build it. And you touched on it earlier, there's organizations that are taking the leap of faith in using it. Like, not many of us went on a training course to use one of these. And I think
And I give my Auntie Joan one every time I see her.
you know, so I honestly think that actually we're going to have to flip our mindset as to how we embrace AI from kind of instead of learning to use it to learn. So actually harnessing that ability, because once you have the training material created, the fact is it's probably out of date by the pace at which AI is moving. So it's that ability of using the technology, but then back to kind of Andrew talks about is understanding actually, you know, that's wrong or that's the human interjection.
That critical thinking.
Yeah. So I think it's that piece. I think to try and master every bit of AI technology, we're not going to get there. So it's that bit of what are the skills that you do need to use it, and for every person on the planet to be able to do so. I think that's where we need to invest our time in.
Yeah, which is a fascinating change in the kind of conversation from even, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where we talk about everybody needs to code, right? And coding is important because obviously you'll need to, for those of you that are making sure the AI is doing what it should be doing, then coding is important. But will coding be a skill that everybody will need, or will that be done by the AI? It's an interesting reflection on the conversation. We could go on, but I just wanted to make sure, is there any questions for our panel? Okay, I've got two. I'm going to take them both at the same time, if that's okay. Is that okay with the panel? Okay. Oh yeah, and you need my microphone. So so there's the lady in the grey jacket, and then Mike, who's got his hand up over there. So Harriet's going to come to you both. We'll take both, and then we'll do a round of answers. So your question, please.
Hi. So I'm Danny from Reading Partnership. Tori, you mentioned around one of the challenges with AI adoption was the plethora of piloting that was failing. I just wondered if you could share what kind of successful piloting strategies have been taken specifically for AI adoption.
Very happy to.
Great question. Let's take the other one and then we can come back to that. So, Mike? Yep.
Thanks for the panel. I just wanted to follow up on 2 points for Tori in particular. You referred to access to data, and it would be quite interesting to think about what government should do to help open up data to make it easier to use AI alongside other enablers. But also, is it worth thinking about sectors that might be leaders in AI that could be champions for their sector, or possibly help to encourage other sectors on the journey to AI? How can sector behavior and cross-sector behavior help AI adoption?
Yeah, as we saw back in the day when internet was coming out and e-business was developing, right?
Well, internet, SMS, mobile, there's lots of examples.
Yeah. So 2 great questions. I don't see any more in the room, and I've got one more. We'll come to you in a minute, sir, if that's okay. So, Tori, I don't know if you want to touch on the piloting question, but it is something that we hear a lot about, how do you get from pilots to then successful scale up and adoption? And then access to data, what should government be doing? And I'm going to say that to everybody, not just to Tori. And do we need sector champions? Do we need champions that can kind of show businesses how this can be done? So Tori, do you want to kick off, and then I'll go around to the panel?
Super. So this is the people we've talked to who've done piloting well. So they adopt a lot of the techniques that are used in certain industries, like say the medical industry. So there's like a baseline and an intervention period, so you can compare when you didn't have something and when you had it. They have a test and control population, so they have people who are exactly the same, 2 groups of people, a test group who have the intervention and the control who don't, and they compare what happens to both. And then that way you're starting to be able to see what the difference is on the technology that you're using. They also use metrics that are business metrics, and they're clear up front as to what the benefit might be, and they think about what would it take to actually do this if it came to pass. So example, it's obviously growth, cost saving, productivity, but also speed and quality and engagement, and they think really quite holistically about that. And then that's probably it. On data, that's the link. Okay, so that's another really interesting thing in the medical space. And I have to say I'm quite lucky here. My PhD was in AI in the medical space. But when you do a pilot, it's not just to test whether something works. It's also to figure out the feasibility of how to do it in production. And there, it's very useful to, for instance, on the data front, even if you're taking a download and you're using some offline data to actually see if it works in the pilot, actually maybe test some things that would work in production, would actually help you figure out how to have real-time data in this situation. And it might not be perfect in the pilot, but it might get you some of the way to figure out how to get over that last hurdle from, it kind of works in theory, but I'm not sure we're ready for the big time for everyone to be using it. Data, hold that thought. The Opportunity Action Plan will talk specifically about opportunities to use the fantastic data that we have in the UK and also use it to unleash potentially creativity in our innovators and going to industries and people who have got solutions to problems and helping them. Those are the types of things which you'd want to consider over time if you're going to take a business perspective. And on trusted influencers, which is what you're talking about. So some industries have done incredibly well in terms of adoption. The way that I was talking about use cases, we very deliberately phrased them as how the business described them in their role in the business, so as they transcend industry, so because often people use very specific language. And it will be great to see not just industry influencers, but local influencers. So when you think about across the UK, does the business leader down the street, is he or she, are they talking about the impact that AI had on their business and inspiring others around them?
Yeah, and are they telling each other what they've done and how they've done it?
Because then it becomes real.
Yeah.
I always think it becomes real when my mum does it. So
there you go. That's, well, we need to get to that point. My mother, it's going to take quite a while.
Well, it's a phone thing, right?
So,
Can I say one quick thing?
Last point. I'm sorry, so we have run out of time, but just the last point.
Just on the data front, one of the things I would say is building a deep capability within government to be able to prioritize a hierarchy of data by value is a really critical part, so that we're able to put the effort in the right place, be able to get a good deal out of it rather than actually lose out on the public purse for it. And I think that's a really tough thing to do at the moment. And one of the things I'd encourage everyone is if there are particular bits of public sector data sets that you think are especially valuable, there are lots of ways to get in touch with people in government or indeed in Parliament. And I'd certainly really welcome any conversations on that, because if we are able to build a specific focus on some data sets that are clearly deeply valuable for the public and productivity context that we're in, I think that'd be quite a helpful starting point as well.
Well, look, we're going to have to bring that conversation to a close, but actually a really detailed and really nuanced conversation. So just, I hope you'll agree, a really fascinating insight into applied AI, but perhaps also, not just looking at where we are right now, but where we may be heading and how do we move forward and get this right. So please join me in thanking 𝗨𝗲𝗀𝗀, Gareth, Andrew, 𝗧𝗲𝗃 and Tori, our wonderful panel. Please thank them.